All right, so as many of you guys already may know, there is a comedy festival going on in Saudi Arabia called the Riyadh Comedy Festival. And it's been making the news, it's been making a lot of buzz, not just necessarily because political commentators are talking about it, but also because it's drawn the backlash of other comedians as well. And so, as you can see here, this is one of the promotional posters, I suppose, for the comedy show. And you got some huge names on here. You have Tom Segura, you have Pete Davidson, you have the people from the Andrew Santino and Bobby Lee, the Bad Friends podcast. I couldn't remember it. Aziz Ansari, Chris DeStefano, Mark Norman, Dave Chappelle, Andrew Schultz, Louis C.K., Gabriel Iglesias, Kevin Hart, and unfortunately Bill Burr as well. And Bill Burr is someone who I've been praising recently because, as many of you also may know, the comedy scene, comedy culture has taken a pretty sharp right-wing turn as of the last couple of years, where you have people like Andrew Schultz, Tom Segura, Joe Rogan, the Rogan Spear, I guess specifically, have all been completely captured by the MAGA right, and they're essentially political pundits. And one of the few people that have called this scene out was Bill Burr, and it was really refreshing to hear Bill Burr just tear into these anti-woke comedians that claim that they're for freedom of speech and all that jazz, and yet many of them are here on this poster, and we'll get into that. We'll get into that later. The reason why this is big news, or why this is drawing so much ire, is because it's Saudi Arabia, plain and simple. Saudi Arabia recently has been going on this campaign where they're trying to diversify their revenue streams, because right now they're largely, if not only, focused on oil money, but they want to also go into the entertainment sector so that way they can have another stream of revenue. And largely what they've been doing is this thing called sports washing. Well, they'll go into sports and they'll finance certain teams, if not just straight up financing some of the cities, the local cities for that teams, most notably with Newcastle United, for example, where it was I don't think it was a public investment fund. Hold on, let me just fact check myself. So yeah, it is the public investment fund, and they don't just use their extraordinary wealth to purchase these teams and then purchase better players so that way they can perform much, much better, and they have a much better image among the fans of that team, saying that these new Saudi owners aren't that bad and they have a much better, much rosier picture when it comes to their global image. It's not just that, they also finance local infrastructure so that way they have some leverage over the politicians, and this is really concerning. This is a big deal, and a lot of people are finally starting to get fed up with it and complain about it much more. We saw it recently with boxing, where Turki Al-Sheikh was booed at the Canelo versus Crawford match. And then, of course, now we have the Saudi festival, in which you have some of these the biggest name comedians going over to Saudi Arabia, and they're not just performing for the people there. They're not just performing for the civilians. They're performing for the actual politicians over there in Saudi Arabia. So it's not like they're just going over to a different country and saying that, yeah, I disagree with the government. I'm going over to this country because I want to play for the people, not the government itself. No, they're playing for the government, and because of this, they've drawn the ire of many of their fellow comedians like Marc Maron, like Shane Gillis, like Stavros. Which I didn't know that much about Stavros. I knew very vaguely that he was on Cumtown back when it was called Cumtown, and I know there was some fallout with them. I'm not too. I don't really know what that drama is, but I do know that he's a pretty popular comedian. A lot of people like him. But I didn't know that he was also going on an anti-woke crusade among comedy podcasts, and we're gonna go deeper into that later on. But he also criticized them in probably one of the funniest clips that I've seen regarding this situation. But let's go over some of the clips where it shows their fellow comedians criticizing this and kind of give some commentary on them, because I think this is important.
Well, there's a Riyadh Comedy Festival. I don't know if you heard about that. This is true. There's a Riyadh, Saudi Arabia Comedy Festival. I mean, how do you even promote that? Like, from the folks that brought you 9/11, 2 weeks of laughter in the desert. Don't miss it. I mean, the same guy that's going to pay them is the same guy that paid that guy to bonesaw Jamal Khashoggi and put him in a suitcase. But don't let that stop the yucks. It's going to be a good time.
That's absolutely true, by the way. Just a couple of months ago, that journalist was found dismembered at the behest of the same people that are paying these comedians to go over there to Riyadh and make some jokes for these people that had that journalist and dismembered. That's true. And anyways, another funny little response was by that Stavros guy again, who again I don't know too much about him, but he seems to be pretty funny. Anyways, so this was on the podcast with Sam Morrill and Mark Norman. Jesus, I have the worst memory in the world.
London, Ontario, and then I'll be Chicago, September 5th, and then September 11th, theater at MSG, and then September 27th, Saudi Arabia with...
Oh, you fucking piece of shit. You're all fucking pieces of shit.
In a stone Sam.
Yeah. Oh, come on. Jessica Kirsten's getting it first. Right? What the hell?
He's not leaving, I'll tell you that.
Oh, fuck.
It's going to be hard to do crowd work with that burqa.
Everyone doing all the people cleaning your sheets are just Filipino slaves.
They're doing it too, right?
I am.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
October 8th. I figured the 7th would have been in poor taste, so I'm doing the 8th.
What? Jesus, it takes place on October 7th. You guys are in Riyadh on October 7th.
I realize that.
I'm on the 8th. I'm there on the 8th.
Oh, my God.
But it's going on the 7th. You're going to be doing remembrance posts from Saudi Arabia? Yeah, from Saudi Arabian airspace?
Salad. Hold on. Distraction.
All right.
Yeah, so that's great. It's being called out. It's being called out in a comedic way, and that's fine. You wouldn't want to actually have a serious conversation about the ethical implications of going to Saudi Arabia on a comedy podcast. You're just torpedoing your career there. And it also I don't think it's really an effective strategy of convincing people. I think people in the comedy world probably wouldn't really care too much or be very much swayed if Stavros had a serious philosophical conversation about the ethical implications of going to Saudi Arabia for a comedy show. So, but I'm glad that he addressed it in a comedic way, in which it's clearly communicated that it's pretty bad that you're going to Saudi Arabia to do a comedy show. But there were some people who were offered to go who refused, and one of them actually was Shane Gillis. Shane Gillis is another one of those comedians who he's very closely associated with the Rogan sphere, but it seems like as of late he's been trying to distance himself from that type of comedian, and I've always admired that about him, because I remember when he got fired from SNL. He got fired from SNL for making jokes that some found to be insensitive towards Asians. I don't think for me, my philosophy on comedy is you can make fun of anything, you can make jokes about anything in the world, so long as you're not actually being serious about it, right? If it's a joke, go for it. I don't care if some people are offended by certain jokes. I think that's fine. I think it's reasonable for certain people to find certain jokes offensive. That makes sense. But I don't think the onus should be on the comedian to change their material. I think the onus should just be, all right, go look for a comedian that's more suited towards your type of comedy style. And I think that's fine. I don't like the people who constantly yell and complain about comedians making offensive jokes, but I also don't like the people who constantly complain about the people complaining. Just do your job, right? And Shane Gillis is one of those comedians who didn't try to make it a shtick, just being anti-woke. It looked like he just wanted to be a comedian, right? He just wanted to make jokes that were funny. The joke didn't land, I guess, and they fired him from SNL, but he didn't go on as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware, he didn't go on a big anti-woke crusade about it. He was just saying that sucks, but, keep going at it, and he seems to be really, really popular. Let's listen to this clip where he where he addresses the situation with Saudi. This is before I think the majority of the fallout had happened.
Sorry, they just went to the desert and just
They were asking me to go to the Middle East soon.
What? Where? Why?
Saudi Arabia and UAE or Dubai.
Dubai?
I think I'm gonna pass.
Yeah. For the troops? Is it for the troops?
Not for the troops.
What?
It's for the Saudis.
For the Saudi princes?
Yeah, and everyone's like, yeah, you should do it. Everyone's doing it. It's like, for Saudis?
Yeah.
Weren't those the 9/11 guys?
So I thought.
Aren't they exactly the 9/11 guys?
It was Iran, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's all been Iran this whole time.
It was Iran, it was Iraq. I can't keep track of our countries that did 9/11. But yeah, so that's a funny clip, and Shane Gillis was offered it and he denied it, and he's talked about it at other points as well, and I might address those videos later on because I'm thinking about making a video on Shane Gillis. Another one who was also invited but declined the offer, and more interestingly actually posted some of the stipulations given to her in order to accept the offer, was, I don't know who this comedian is, and I am so sorry that I'm about to butcher her name. It was Atsuko Okatsuka. I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name. I'm so sorry. I should have at least listened to a video where someone says her name, or where she says her name. But she actually showed pictures of the contract that was sent to her if she were to accept the offer to go to Saudi Arabia. And so this is from an article in the AV Club, where it says comedian Atsuko Okatsuka post contract after turning down Riyadh Comedy Festival. And she actually makes an interesting point here that I do want to talk about and that I do think she is correct on. So she posted all of this on Threads, which I had no idea what Threads was before this, but I guess it's like a Twitter for Instagram. But she said, FYI, there are more of us that said no to the Riyadh Comedy Festival in Saudi Arabia. Here's the offer I got back in July. Then she goes on to say, the money is coming straight from the Crown Prince, who actively executes journalists, people with non-lethal drug offenses, bloggers, etc., without due process. Yep, that's 100% true. Again, for the people that want to create this false equivalency, which we'll go into later on this video because Jefferies had a horrible response to the criticism. People who want to make a false equivalency, like the big difference between a Western country, like let's say the United States, that you could argue has done many similar things that Saudi Arabia has done when it comes to international politics, the big difference, at least for the people living within those countries, is that I can upload this video online without really any concern that the government's going to crack down on me, that the government itself is going to have an issue with what I say and actually do something lethal about it. That is a huge astronomical difference that changes the course of culture, that changes the course of politics. And they don't have something as simple as that. So there is no false equivalency to create. You can acknowledge the war crimes that the United States has done or has allegedly done, while also acknowledging that there's a difference in severity between the United States and a country like Saudi Arabia. But anyway, so she goes on to say, a lot of the you can't say anything anymore comedians are doing the festival. They had to adhere to censorship rules about the types of jokes they can make. And so she posted some of the content restrictions that were given to her, which states, artists shall not prepare or perform any material that may be considered to degrade, defame, or bring into public disrepute, contempt, scandal, embarrassment, or ridicule. A, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, including its leadership, public figures, culture, or people. B, the Saudi royal family, legal system, or government. And C, any religion, religious tradition, religious figure, or religious practice. And that's a good point that she's bringing up, that a lot of the, anti-cancel culture type of comedians are going to this show. The people who constantly complain on Joe Rogan about how the left is censoring their ability to make jokes, or the left is hurting their ability to make jokes. A lot of these people are going over to Saudi Arabia because they're being given a huge back of cash. Most notably, at one point, was Tim Dillon. When you look at some of these comedians, like Tom Segura, like Dave Chappelle, like Andrew Schultz, who complain about cancel culture, and I think rightfully so, in the sense that I don't think it's okay to cancel comedians over jokes, as I said earlier. Like, you're complaining about how the United States now has this culture where you can't make jokes about anything, that certain topics are just completely off limits because the censorial left doesn't want you to even look at those topics, or they don't want you to hear certain jokes at the possibility that someone might be offended. They're constantly complaining about this, and many of them have built up a career around this identity. But yet, when it comes to actually standing up for your principles, you just completely ignore your principles if the bag of money is large enough. And it really brings into question whether or not some of these comedians are just conveniently turning a blind eye because they love the money, or if they're just grifters and they only say the things that they feel like would make them the most amount of money. And the fact is that there's a lot of money to be made in being an anti-woke comedian. That's just a fact. There's a lot of money to be made there. And so when I see something like this, when I see someone like Andrew Schultz complaining about cancel culture, and then he goes to the country that has some of the biggest cancel culture norms in existence, and you don't really say anything about it, at least not until the money's done, it's hard for me to really genuinely believe that you're principled on your beliefs. And Tim Dillon's an interesting case because Tim Dillon was invited and he accepted, of course. But what was interesting about his situation is that he addressed the criticism early on, and he basically turned it into a joke. And he said, look, yes, I will be going over to Saudi Arabia, and I am going to be turning a blind eye to, what's going on over there, like slavery. I forget the exact jokes that he made. We'll look at the clip.
But the reality is, it's a good amount of money. And sometimes, unfortunately, in life, you got to take the money. And I know young kids don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. I know they don't want to hear that. Sometimes you got to take the money. You got to take the money and look the other way. Take the money and look the other way. Sorry. Sorry, folks. Sorry. 9/11 was a long time ago, and who even knows what happened with that? Who even knows what happened with that? Okay?
Like, that's just textbook denialism, right? That's textbook, hey, who knows what happened with the Epstein files? Yes, it is weird that the Trump administration is doing everything that they can to make sure that the Epstein files isn't released. It is really weird that everything that they're telling us contradicts what they previously told us, the same exact administration. It is a little weird, but who knows what happened, right? I think Tim Dillon is clearly a very smart person. I've heard a lot of his political takes, and I don't agree with the vast majority of them, but he's clearly a smart guy. He's clearly very knowledgeable. But he doesn't seem to be very knowledgeable about Saudi Arabian politics, it seems, because he was flabbergasted when he made jokes about turning a blind eye towards the atrocities of the Saudi Arabian government, and he was surprised that he was fired right after that. And I don't understand why he would be surprised, because the whole point of him going over there and bringing attention to Saudi Arabia, to the Riyadh Comedy Festival, is so they can get a better image globally. Even if it's just within the context of a joke or like a half joke, you're still bringing light to the claim, to the horrible stuff that Saudi Arabia is doing. You're still bringing that to light. You're still mentioning that. They don't want you to mention that, even if it's a joke, because the point is to sane wash everything that they're doing. So of course they're gonna uninvite you. I didn't hear this I didn't hear this like at the time. I only heard this after the fact after he was fired. But if I heard this beforehand, I would have known you're probably going to get an email at the very least to tell you to stop talking about it. But another terrible response was from Jim Jefferies, and this one might be my least favorite. I think I'm actually annoyed by his response, because his response is so dumb that I wouldn't be surprised if it was a script given to him, so that way he could just regurgitate it on some podcast, the Theo Von podcast in this case, because his reasoning lacks any level of critical thinking skills, and we're going to listen to what he actually says and then address it. So this is what Jim Jefferies said in response to some of the criticism.
I'm going to Saudi Arabia coming up, and
let's talk about that.
Because you just talked about Qatar. I'm going to this thing in Saudi Arabia. I've been given a little bit of grief online, nothing too much.
About going to Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, a few people have gotten into the comics who are and the list is,
at this point, it's not, this was a month ago, so at this point it's not just a few people. Now everyone's talking about it, or at least everyone who's aware of the comedy scene.
Big. It's Louis C.K., me, Bill Burr, Fluffy's going, Whitney Cummings
there's
is
a
going.
big festival going out and
It's
didn't get
called
invited.
the Riyadh Comedy Festival, and here we go. Andrew Schultz, Aziz Ansari, Bill Burr, Jim Jefferies, Jimmy Carr, Joe Coy, Kevin Hart, Sam. We got people.
Great lineup too. Jessica Curson, Nimish Patel. Wow,
it's as good a lineup I've seen at any comedy festival ever.
Unbelievable.
Now, people have been going, oh, how dare you go over there after they a reporter. That was the big one. There's been a reporter who they killed. You don't think our government's bump people? I think Jeffrey Epstein was bumped off.
I'm sure that
right.
Every place we've damaged a lot of places.
Yeah.
So the way he's framing it is as if the main thing that we're concerned about is the fact that they had a journalist off a couple of months ago, and that's pretty much it. I don't know if he's being malicious here, in the sense that he's trying to just sane wash a lot of what they did, or if he's that naive. We're not just talking about the assassination of one journalist. This has happened multiple times before. We're also talking about public executions that occur within this country. We're talking about male guardianship laws that still exist within this country. And sure, Saudi Arabia has this 2030 vision where they're expected to update their cultural norms by that time, as well as their revenues, which goes alongside sports washing. But every single thing that we've seen from Saudi Arabia indicates that they don't really care about that cultural goal whatsoever. They still have an asinine amount of archaic laws and customs within that country, as well as the way in which they interact with the international community. So no, this idea that we're just talking about one journalist who was off, but we did the same thing with Epstein, so therefore you can't really say anything, it's just a stupid point to make. Also, another thing to mention, he is conflating two separate things here. He is conflating performing for the people within a country versus performing for the actual country, the government officials. There's a huge difference between going over to Saudi Arabia and performing for the people of Saudi Arabia, the people who have no say in how their government operates, versus performing for that government itself. This is why Tony Hinchcliffe got so much grief for performing at Madison Square Garden for Donald Trump, because you are on the dime of the president. And there's a huge difference between just supporting the president, supporting MAGA, okay, if you want to go down that route, sure. But there's a huge difference from that and inviting JD Vance onto your podcast, inviting Donald Trump onto your podcast, performing for them and taking their money to make sure that they have a better image. Those two things are hugely, consequentially different. Jefferies is going to perform for, get paid by, and assist politically the Saudi regime. He is not just going to perform for the people. He's going over to assist the Saudi Arabian government. And that is a huge difference than what he is claiming is the issue here. I mean, it's ridiculous, the fact that a lot of these comedians constantly moralize and talk down to a lot of their fellow Americans because of some cancel culture, anti-woke reasons. And yet they're over here engaging in something that is very clearly much worse than the people that they're criticizing are doing. And so it's a shame that this is happening. It sucks to see Bill Burr there. It sucks to see Louis C.K. there, but we're living in strange times.